This morning I'm in Sacramento, California, talking with Coral Henning, who is the Law Library Director here at the Sacramento County Public Law Library. I know in California you're all known now as public law libraries because I've talked to a couple of your colleagues in other counties and they have the same designation in their name. I was taken actually with the setting for this library. I expected Sacramento to be a big city, and yes, as I drove in there were some buildings in the distance that looked like big city type buildings. But this is a very nice area, the town you're in. And I know you're not far from the capital as well.
Right.
But I was surprised. It's like driving through a residential area, which is I think a lot of the buildings are.
Yes.
And it's not overly crowded or congested. I was very, very impressed with your city.
It's very
Carl.
walkable, very a city of trees downtown,
Mm-hmm.
and we love it here.
Yeah, and the library has a nice setting. Yeah. Obviously, there are a few parking lots around here, but that I think is an essential thing because you have the courthouse nearby.
Right.
I saw the jurors' parking lot across the street.
Exactly.
Well, with that sort of by way of introduction, I probably should mention that you have been actually with the library here from starting in 1996 and been director starting in 2005.
Correct.
All right, with sort of that behind us, why don't we move on to some of the more traditional questions that I like to ask to sort of set the stage. And one of them is, could you tell us a little bit about your life, perhaps both when you were young and today?
Well, I grew up in San Rafael, California, which is in Marin County. And Marin County is the county that connects with the Golden Gate Bridge to San Francisco. And I lived there till I went to law school. And then I moved to San Francisco. And my dad was a merchant marine. And so he was gone a lot. And my mom was a homemaker. And I have an older brother that's about 10 years older who's also an attorney. And moving here in 1996, I got married in 1998 to my husband, Dwan. And we've moved around a bit in Sacramento. We moved just last month. Moving sucks. But
Doesn't it though?
Yeah, it really does. But anyway, we moved to the Land Park area, which is out by the zoo. And we have a really fun, wacky, lovely home that has a 9-hole putting green in the backyard. So hopefully my short game is going to get better over time. But I love Sacramento. It has a lot of sense of community.
Yeah, it looks like it probably would, because one doesn't get much more than a first impression, as I did driving in here. But it has that sort of look to it as a town. It's more of a town and less of a city in some ways, and yet city in the right sense.
Yes.
I suspect.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a really great place. It wasn't always this way. When I moved here in '96, I actually didn't claim that I lived here because it was such a cow town, and the sidewalks rolled up at 4:30, and all the state employees would run away like cockroaches. But now, today, there's fantastic restaurants, there's fantastic arts and cultural events, and so now I totally claim it, and I'm glad to be a resident of Sacramento.
I think arguably that is exactly the right thing to live in a city where you can claim it because it has the sorts of things that you're interested in having around.
Exactly.
Well, your mention of the putting green leads me sort of as Frank Hodak, who also does these conversations, would say a segue into the next topic, and that is I want to ask you if you have any hobbies, passions, or other pursuits that you engage in, presumably outside of working hours.
Yes. I do golf.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband and I golf, and when we go to sometimes to AALL things or on vacation, we do take our clubs with us. I love animals, and I have 2 giant breed dogs, an Irish Wolfhound and a Black Russian Terrier, and we always have at least 2 dogs in our household, and we participate in a lot of dog-friendly events like yappy hours and things with the Front Street Animal Shelter here in town. And I'm a big foodie, and I like to cook. I am a co-founder of an artisan pickle business called A Better Pickle Company. And right now I'm in the test kitchen testing out recipes, and soon we will be in specialty stores near you. That's
Very
my
good. Well,
hope.
maybe so near me. I'm not that far away, up in Washington State.
That's right.
Only a couple of states up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you like pickles?
I do, as a
Okay.
matter of fact. Yeah.
I think
And
everybody
they're one of
does.
the things that's still on my allowed diet.
Okay.
Yeah. They're good for me, I think.
They are.
They
Vinegar
don't
is good for you.
have all the wrong things in them that I'm not supposed to be eating these days.
Right.
Well, sort of with that, could we start to focus on you professionally now more? Although making pickles sounds like a profession in its own right.
Yeah.
I know, Carl, that you have 3 degrees. Could you tell us about what they are and where you got them?
I have a BA from San Francisco State that I earned in 1980. When I went to college, I transferred every single year. So I graduated high school a little bit early, and I went to College of Marin, which is a community college. And then I went to University of San Francisco, and I didn't really like it there. And so I transferred to University of Hawaii in Honolulu. And then I was a junior, and I wanted to graduate, and they had actually very, very strict curriculum requirements, and I couldn't graduate. So I transferred to San Francisco State and was able to graduate in 3 years. And then I applied to Golden Gate, and I was accepted, and I got my law degree in '83. Mm-hmm. And then I went, I worked in law libraries, and I got my library degree in 2003. Mm-hmm. And I was very fortunate because I was able to participate in an LSTA grant program that allowed tuition reimbursement. So my library degree was essentially free.
Well, you can't argue with that.
No, I couldn't argue with that. It was all my excuses for going to library school were over. I had no reason not to go.
Now, I did notice that you became a law librarian some years before you actually got the library degree. You had the law degree, but you didn't have the library degree yet. So that leads me to wonder how it was that you decided to become a law librarian, and further, did someone have a role in that decision or guiding you?
Well, I don't know that anybody comes to law librarianship in a direct linear route. People seem to kind of fall into it in different ways. And so, when I was working at the, I first started working in law libraries when I was in college. And in 1979, my brother said, why don't you get a job at the Marin County Law Library? Mm-hmm. And he goes, I know the librarian, and they need somebody to work in the evenings. And so I went there and applied, and the librarian just essentially gave me the keys and said, good luck, and walked away. And so I was like, he just said, here's the California collection, and here's the federal collection, and that's pretty much all you need to know. They didn't have a catalog or anything, and I just kind of wandered around. It was a very small library anyway, and it was just one-person operation. And I was expected to file and pocket part, and I didn't really know how to do that. So I kind of was teaching myself, and then if somebody would ask me, oh, where's Witkin? That didn't tell me if it was California or federal. So I would call my brother and say, where's Witkin? And he'd like go down the first aisle, and so he would kind of coach me. And then after that experience, when I was in law school, a friend of mine said, why don't you apply as a student at the San Francisco County Law Library? And so I did, and they said, well, we don't hire first years. And I said, but I have experience, which was unusual for them. And they said, well, you do have experience. Uh-huh. So they said, well, we'll hire you. And so my first job was sitting in front of a wall of CCH binders for 4 hours a day, filing that loose leaf service. And then eventually they said, you're kind of catching on. You could check the mail in. And I'm like, yay. So I'm checking the mail in. The Card X comes out and putting, receiving the mail. And then they're like, well, now you could file other services. Mm-hmm. So I could do pocket parts and other things. Then eventually said, well, maybe you could answer the phone and page materials. And this was a time in the 80s that county law libraries were hopping, and especially in San Francisco, because they had a lot of large law firms and they had bicycle messengers. And so we would pull the books off the shelf, bag them up in these plastic bags, and put a checkout slip on them. The bike messenger would come and sign it, grab the bag, and off they ran. And so it was a very busy time. And then eventually they let me do some ready reference. And so by the time I graduated from law school, they offered me a job as the assistant director. And that's how I kind of became into law librarianship. It wasn't really something I planned. It was something that was kind of presented before me. And I was the only one of my friends that actually had a job after law school. And so I was like, wow, passing the bar, the pressure's off. I don't have to practice. And
you won't lose your job if you don't make it to the bar.
Exactly. So I was pretty pleased at that time to just kind of fall into it. And, I worked there for a number of years. And then my colleagues, especially in the California Council of County Law Librarians, said, Coral, if this is really a career for you, you really have to go and get your library degree. And I was very resistant because I felt like the law degree was in degree poker, the better degree. But, finally when I was able to get that LSTA grant, I was able to do it completely, almost all 100% online through distance education at San Jose State. All my reasons or excuses not to get the degree just fell away, and I got it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is sort of interesting. Your description of what you did in those early years, especially before you had your degrees, is so reminiscent of what we all did at one point or another. I started off as a kid doing a lot of the same things at the University of Washington Law Library, and filing loose leaf services, moving books. Today's librarians miss out on all that good stuff, if one can call it that, because I guess in this day and age you go online and the publishers take care of making everything be up to date, whereas in the old days they'd publish the stuff to keep it up to date, but we had to go in and take pages out and put other pages in, filing loose leaf services, for example, and putting pocket parts in the back of book spines inside the back cover.
Or those B&A combs to get those tax portfolios
those
filed.
are terrible. Everybody had their own system, but
Yes.
every publisher, but we had to keep up with that. And I remember one of my summer tasks every year when I was working for the library was to take over for the fellow who normally filed most of the loose leaf services. This was his full-time job in the place. But he'd go on vacation, and my job was to go in there and fix any glitches that he allowed to occur.
Oh, wow.
And
You were the cleanup guy.
so I was sort of the cleanup guy, but we didn't tell him that. If there were things missing or something, what he'd do often is leave things in that should come out.
Oh.
And I would do the weeding once a year that way. So it worked out all right, I guess.
Yeah. And since I've been here, I've had lots of different jobs too. I started out as a contract employee. Shirley David was implementing Dynex. And so the staff needed time to input all the records and do the configuration. So they wanted someone to staff the reference desk so that the librarians could be off doing that. So I came up here because I was unemployed or underemployed at the time, and I worked for a number of months living with friends to get that project off the ground. And then Shirley said, well, I think maybe you have some aptitude here. How about being a computer services librarian? We need somebody that can update the CD-ROMs and update the client matters and things like that. And so then I became the computer services librarian. And then they moved me over to reference in public services. And then we were moving out of the basement of the courthouse into a leased facility, and had this big tenant improvement construction project. And part of that project was to develop a training center so that we could offer the public and attorneys continuing legal education classes. And so then they needed someone to coordinate that. And so I applied to be the training coordinator. And so then I was the training coordinator here for launching that project. And then Shirley decided she was going to retire. And then I had the library degree then, conveniently. And so I met the qualifications for the job. And I had obviously worked here a number of years. And so I applied to the board and I became the director in 2005. So I've had a lot of varied hats in my law library professional career.
Well, you also mentioned as we've gone along that colleagues had some influence on some of the direction you all decided to take things. Initially, colleagues that you knew from the associations in the San Francisco area
Right.
had, suggested you get the degree.
Yeah, nudged.
And then you came here, and Shirley David, who is really very prominent in our profession, or was, very highly regarded director.
Yes.
So you must have had some opportunities to learn from the master as well while you were here.
I did, and she was very, very supportive of me going to school and allowing me some time off to accomplish the degree. And she was very supportive of all of the staff to have professional development, and she encouraged us to participate in the associations. And in fact, when we would have performance reviews, part of our goals was to, what committees are you on, and what are you doing, and run for this and do that. So,
well, that would be what I would expect, knowing what I did know, which was not tremendous amount about Shirley. I mean, she had such a stellar reputation in AELL circles, and I knew her, of course, through that. So it doesn't surprise me that she would take the approach that those of you who worked with her ought to have these same opportunities to develop your interpersonal skills and in networking with colleagues in the broader part of our profession.
yes, that's still that's my philosophy as well, as we encourage people here to to really participate in the profession. And many of us here now are holding offices in a variety of different committees.
Well, I know that sort of swings us into what I wanted to talk about next, and that is your rather extensive and excellent record of professional involvement and leadership. I know that many years ago you were Secretary-Treasurer of the California Council of County Law Librarians. I assume that's part of the group that perhaps initially led you into this field. And then more recently, you've been president of the Northern California Association of Law Libraries, one of the chapters of AELL. And you're on the board of the State Court and County Law Librarians Special Interest section at the moment. Sort of with those few things mentioned, do you want to talk a little bit about your professional involvement? Perhaps tell us a few things that you've done, or what you think you've achieved in those roles, and more particularly, why you think they're important.
Well, I think you get more out of an association when you participate. If you're just sitting on the sidelines, you don't really get the full benefit of what the association can offer you. And you really don't get to know the members because you're just going maybe to an event, a workshop or something. And that's even true in AALL when you go to the conference. You're like ships passing in the night. You don't know these people. You don't have any connection with them. But if you actually sit down and work with them, even through conference callings or task force or whatever discrete tasks, it just really gets you connected to them. And it also gives you other skill sets that you may not have. I mean, in NoCal, we put on a spring institute annually, and that is event planning. I mean, it's just you're dealing with a hotel, you're working about food and beverage things, you're working in a budget, you're coordinating with third-party vendors, you're planning out the event space, you're scheduling, speakers, you're coming up with a theme and a timeline. I mean, there's so many moving parts that you would normally not do in your day-to-day life, but this is great. And then maybe you need to plan a wedding or an anniversary. You have some of
You're
that
an
skill
expert.
set. Yeah, you do. You have some of that skill set. You know how to negotiate. And and I'm involved in other nonprofits as well. I'm the president of Slow Food Sacramento, which is a chapter of Slow Food International. I'm a president of Sacramento Mountaineers, which is another nonprofit. I'm the treasurer of my neighborhood association. I'm on the board of California Lawyers for the Arts. It's just makes me just a more well-rounded person and more interesting, I think, I hope. And it makes me have a better sense of community because I'm working, boots on the ground with people, and we are building things together. And I really see that.
Well, I think you've summed up very well why I also was active in the associations over the years. There's so much more you get out of it. And it also makes your own life, your own job, so much more interesting and challenging in another way. Because you do have so much variety that you get involved in.
And it's fun. Don't
It
forget
really
that.
is.
It's
and
fun.
the people you work with are wonderful people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to know colleagues and network. I mean, it's
Yeah,
fantastic.
and then when you travel around, you visit them. I mean, because you have a connection. It's like, you go to a different city and it's like, wow, I know somebody there. I was on the board with them.
There's one thing that I forgot to mention when we were going to set up this thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and if you're willing to tell us a bit about the library here.
Sure.
We're sitting in the boardroom here at the Sacramento County Public Law Library. So you have a board of directors with whom you work.
I do. We are.
And you want to sort of take
Sure.
it from there.
Yeah. Well, all county law libraries have a board of trustees, and they're usually made up of judges and an attorney member that is appointed by the board of supervisors and our county council. And it's just a great group of professionals, to work for. And they allow me to do the day-to-day operations, but I come to them for policy and obviously budget. We had to move out of our other building almost 3 years ago because we lost our lease and the building was actually going into foreclosure. So that was kind of a trying time because the county is obligated to provide us space. And so fortunately, this building was available, although it was a much smaller space. Instead of 20,000 square feet, we're like 14,200. And so that's another skill set that was challenging. I became the project manager of a construction site, because we had to do all the tenant improvements. So I got to pick out the color scheme and the finishes and, determine what was going to go where and, carpet and flooring and so on. And then coordinate the actual move, which is modular furniture. We had compact shelving. We had to build a faux floor so that the tracks could go in. There was just a lot of moving parts. And so, we've been in here 2.5 years and we just love it. It's just a really nice space. And the art that's in back of me was donated by my board president, who was on our board from 1984 until just last year. And he had a very long run, Austin Cooper. And so, anyway, we just have a great working relationship. I'm so fortunate. And my staff is so capable and so professional. And my assistant director, Kelly Brown, and my assistant director, Jean Willis, are fabulous team players here. And I actually at one point worked for Jean. in Fresno. She was my boss and she hired me. Fresno wasn't such a great fit for me. So I was glad to.
Must have worked
to move
all
on.
right between the two of you.
Yeah, it
because now
worked
she's
out.
here.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it worked out for us. We became good friends from that experience. But yeah, this is a great location, and we are the nexus between the public and the courts for access to justice. And you know, the makeup of who goes to the county law libraries has really evolved since I started in the 80s. It was, you know, 80% attorneys and probably 20% the public, and that has completely flipped. And so now we really see a lot of self-represented litigants and people struggling to do things on their own. They can't afford to hire attorneys. And so if you go to our website at sacla.org, you will see that we put up a lot of content to really help those folks. And it's really our virtual branch. So we're pretty happy with our work here.
Well, I remember as I approached the building this morning, I was walking down the street looking for the entrance, among other things, and I could see in, and you could see the Carrolls and a couple of the offices, and it looked very much like one would think a library ought to look these days.
Yeah, it's much more inviting and less intimidating. Our old space was a beautiful Beaux-Arts building built in 1916, but it had, you know, a big marble lobby with sweeping staircase, and people just didn't feel, you know, like welcomed, you know. And here they can see in advance of what to expect, and they can see friendly faces, people working, people studying at Carroll's and whatnot, and they go, oh, I get what that place is, you know. And I think it's really helped with putting people at ease when they come in.
Well, when I did walk in, you had a couple of staff members right there at the reference desk and the circulation station that are right together, and they were both busy. I had to pause and wait a moment while, you know, until one of them could finish up with a client or whatever you call your patrons,
Right.
and then could ask me, you know, if she could assist, and
Right.
she was able to do that.
Yes.
But
Good.
it really sort of struck me as a active, vibrant kind of an operation.
It is. It is. We're really happy and proud of it.
Must make you happy, as you say.
Yeah.
It should.
Yeah, you know, we get a lot of kudos, and, you know, people do take time out to thank us for helping them. We do have a self-help center here, which is also provides a little bit more hands-on assistance with document preparation and with procedural information, and we do workshops. We do a name change workshop every single Monday. People are changing their names, who knows why, but they are, and they're doing it, and
Well, if they're trying to hide from creditors, I know they can't get
No.
away with that.
And we're, you know, we assist them. We do discovery workshops. We, you know, also our librarians teach classes here as well. And so we get thank you notes, you know, from people, and sometimes they put a $20 bill in there, and we have a donation box, and people just, you know, show their appreciation anonymously too by putting in, you know, some loose change and whatnot.
Well, it never hurts to have a little of that around. You just never know when opportunities will come along, and the library, you know, to have a source of funding for taking care of those opportunities sometimes hurries things along very well.
Yeah.
Whereas normal budgeting and procedures would make it more difficult.
Yeah, well, you know, we're funded by filing fees, and unfortunately those are somewhat trending down. But we're, you know, making adjustments, and, you know, we're going to be fine.
Well, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. Yeah. Sort of with that, Coral, we're sort of nearing the end of today's conversation, but it's my custom to ask if there's anything that we have not talked about that you would like to mention at this point.
No, I don't have any burning desires right now, Pat, but I appreciate you coming here and all your work on this whole project. It's fantastic.
I appreciate your appreciation. It's a wonderful opportunity for me. I'm, you know, at that point in retirement where I can do stuff like this, and it's great that the Hein Company has decided to go forward with this oral history. So perhaps, and involve me in
Yes.
helping to put together some of these conversations. It's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Pat. I appreciate it.
Sort of on that note, Carl Henning. I want to thank you not only on my behalf for being part of today's conversation, but also on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Hodak, and Dick Spinelli, our colleagues with whom I have the pleasure of being involved in putting together this oral history of law librarianship for the Spinelli's Law Library Reference Shelf portion of Hein Online.